and we will I was just told that the recording started so that we can share this with others who are unable to be here today. One of the courses I teach for Empire State College is called Introduction to College Reading and Writing. Would you raise your hand if you've already taken that course? Has anyone taken that course? Several people. So if you have already taken it, some of the things you're going to hear today may be a review, because I have based my information, or at least a large portion of it, on the textbook that goes along with that course. Introduction to College Reading and Writing. College reading? You may be thinking, didn't I learn to read in elementary school? Why should I learn different strategies to get the most out of college reading? Well, first, you know, college reading can be challenging simply because there's so much of it. And it requires a higher level of understanding, right? So, different strategies or approaches to college texts are needed. And reading strategies that we will talk about, it just means using specific techniques for understanding, studying, and learning. And whether you're a visual, auditory, kinesthetic learner, or a tacit reader, some methods may work better for your individual style. If we talk about ways of knowing and ways of learning, we talk about strategies for reading. We're using something called metacognition. Metacognition, knowing about knowing, is having the knowledge and awareness and understanding of the thinking processes involved while you read. And some metacognitive strategies are here. While you're reading, you think about predicting what's going to happen next. You can picture the images that you're reading about. You need to relate it to your own personal experience, and you need to monitor your own understanding, and then use correct strategies to fit the reading. So, moving on. One of the metacognition strategies you may have heard before is keep your eye on the ball, focus. Well, how do you do that? We hope to give you some insight on that. In other words, when you're reading, is your mind starting to wander? Do you realize maybe you're creating a grocery list, but your eyes are traveling over the text? How many of you have had that experience? Want to show me your hands? You realize at the bottom of a page you may not even have, right, almost everyone's had that experience. You say, oh my goodness, what was this about? What did I just read? Yes. So when you become aware of this happening, you know you have to change your strategy, right? And here are some strategies that you might be able to use. First is the think aloud. Think aloud. Here's an example of a student who's been reading about echinoderms. And when she got all through, she said to herself, help, I still don't know what an echinoderm is. What now? What would you suggest for this student? Any ideas? Just type away here, or if you're raising your hand and want to speak to us, we can work that way too. What would you tell a person who's kind of thinking aloud about what they're reading and yet they don't understand what some of the vocabulary is? Take a break. Or perhaps look up the vocabulary word. Thank you. That's a good suggestion. So that will help you zero in on what you don't know. In other words, one of the best strategies is to think aloud and identify what you don't know, because as soon as you do that, you've solved the problem. Then you will find out the answer. When you've had this experience of help, I don't know what I read, it's it reminds me of this word, this Greek word called aporia. In Greek, it means at a loss or confused. But this is a good feeling. When you have aporia, it means you're about to learn something. So instead of letting it get under your skin, take the challenge. Aporia is a good thing. Have you ever used the strategy of mnemonics? Mnemonics help you remember. You can use different techniques to help remember. For instance, suppose you have a problem delineating the difference when you write between the words affect and effect. This is a troublesome pair. How do you know which one is a verb and which is the noun? Well, here's a mnemonic to help you remember. A is action, so it's a verb, and so the spelling with the A is the one you want for when you want an action or verb. So the other one has to be the noun, right? So that's just one example of a mnemonic, something you can devise to help you remember something you need to remember. Does anyone have any other suggestions about mnemonics that they want to share with us over their microphones? Okay, well, let's move on to the featured strategy that I have for you. It's the SQ3R method. Before you read from front to back, it's necessary to use some survey strategies. Then you question. You devise questions. Then you read, and then you have the 3 R's, read, recite, and review. It's the most efficient plan for college reading. Why should you stop and preview or survey before reading from front to end? Why not start from the beginning and read right through the end? How can this be more efficient? Let's see. Let's look at surveys. In the survey strategy, it's the previewing stage. And in these strategies, you look over certain items in the text or in the chapter or in the article, and by examining the headings and some of the highlights, some of the pictures, you can predict content. And in the previewing stage, it's most important to devise questions. Questions that activate your past knowledge, your schemata. And it's also important after you've surveyed to establish a purpose for reading. So, when you survey to activate your schema, like during a single session of work, a half an hour or so, you go very fast over the chapters that you have to read, and you look at the chapter summaries, the headings, the subheadings, meaningful images, tables, and text in bold. This gives you a general idea of what these chapters are about, or items and sections of an article. You can identify topics that are familiar to you. That's very important. And as well as new ones that need more attention. Then you can make a rough outline of the content of those chapters in a table. This is your general plan for reading. Because a survey is like a computer file in your brain. It holds all you know about the subject, and it helps you predict the topic. Previewing helps you bring up your past knowledge of the topic to the printed page. So the next important part of previewing is surveying to create preview questions. How do you create the questions? Here are some items to look at. You look at the title. If the title, for instance, says critical period hypothesis, and you already know what that is, that's great. But if you don't, what's your first question? Anybody want to offer that? Good. We'll hear from. Okay. Is it possible to have them use the mic? All right. The first question about the title is, what is the critical period hypothesis? Then you look at some introductory material. You skim the items for the subheadings, and you make note of what's in italics, boldface print, numbers, visual aids. And then before you read from front to back, it's perfectly legitimate to read the concluding summary. In other words, a summary you'll often find summarizes the goals and objectives that you were supposed to learn in the article. So with that in mind, you can devise questions such as basic as what's the title or topic? And then, while activating your schema, that is your previous knowledge, you're going to determine what information is familiar, and you're going to devise questions based on what is unfamiliar. Okay, in the next page we have kind of hard to read, but it's a questioning sample. The items in blue font were devised based on the students surveying the article and coming up with the questions. And then, after establishing those questions, it's time to read. Only then is it time to read from front to back to find the answers. Does that make sense? Right. And assignments often provide the questions for you, so you have to keep that in mind when you're reading from front to back. Now that's the first R. SQ3R, the first R is read, and this is the knowledge integration stage. Because while you're reading, you're picturing images, you're relating ideas, you're monitoring your own understanding, you're correcting strategies if you realize you're not understanding, and make sure you truly understand the author's views and ideas. Summarizing and paraphrasing at this point is helpful. And we advise you to accept the author's ideas temporarily, even if you may disagree in the end. The author's ideas are a lens with which to look at your world. Extend the author's theories with examples of your own. Think about how you relate that in agreement. So after questions, after deciding what to look for, after establishing a reason and a purpose for reading, then you've begun to read from the beginning. And you have your knowledge integration into your schemata. The author's views, it could be biased, make sure that with Keiki, you can apply your understanding, and it's interesting to see if you disagree or not with the author. But at first, you accept the author's ideas, and as you see in the notes, remember the author's views and ideas can be biased, and so you want to make sure that if you're doing research, you select a reliable source. Of course, the textbooks that you've been that go with the course, you can assume that they are reliable. The next part of surveying, of reading, is to make annotations. We're talking about taking up a pen, a pencil, or a highlighter and writing on the page itself. Writing right in your textbook. You bought it and you own it. You can write in it. And an annotation in a marginal annotation or highlights or underlining, circling new vocabulary, bolding new vocabulary if you're reading an item that you can do digitally. These are all annotative strategies. I want to make a difference. I want to highlight the difference between an annotation that you do with a pen or pencil or highlight and annotative bibliographies. That's something totally different. It's after you've read a book, you just write a brief summary about it, and that's a different kind of an assignment. This is a strategy for reading, annotations. And it's important to keep your annotations kind of consistent And in here we have an example of some digital annotations where the student has taken the material that she received digitally and electronically and put it on Word. In that case, they can highlight with red font and call it the main idea. They can underline significant details, and they can bold new vocabulary. All this can be done digitally. You can save it for review later. Any questions about annotations? All right, here's an example of an annotate. Okay, we're moving on. Here's another set of readers' tips to use thinking strategies while reading. Make predictions. Describe a picture you're forming in your head from the material. Share an analogy. Oh, this is like an experience you might have had. And then you monitor your ongoing comprehension and correct your gaps in comprehension. In other words, while you're reading, you're thinking to yourself, what here is new to my mind? Of course, you're thinking, well, I already know this part, but maybe this part is something I'm not understanding. Maybe I need to highlight this. And among those strategies for integrating knowledge while reading, remember that the good reader predicts. For those of you with young children or for future reference, one of the best tools to use while reading to young children is to ask them to predict what will come next. When the cat in the hat appears on the page, you ask your child, what's going to happen next? So this technique is actually very good for adults. It works well for adults as well. Can you think of some instances where you might be able to use this particular strategy? Well, you can keep it in mind. Visual tools are also an aid to integrating knowledge while reading. I want to give you an example of a visual clue, and I think that's not on this next one, is it? It's on another page. Well, it'll come up. Sorry about that. Okay. So far, we have strategies for integrating knowledge while reading, predicting, visualizing, and drawing comparisons to assimilate new knowledge. So let's move on to the next slide. This is a recall stage, which is the third R. Here's where you review tools to connect your information and it helps you to react, reflect, and evaluate the information you've read. And here, we are going to provide you some review tools in the second stage of reading, the recall stage. And moving on to the next, we have a visual that I mentioned before. Kind of hard to read this, but you get the idea. This is a mind map, and if you want to use a mind map, you can search for different kinds of mind maps if you are a visual learner, and this kind of mapping, connecting ideas, appeals to your way of learning. Note the links in this mind map. They focus and connect and categorize details with the topic. Okay? Any questions? We'll move on to another method or strategy. And it's called Cornell Notes. And we were looking for the URL for that because it's so hard to see this. Are we going to be able to show people a better view? In Cornell Notes, actually anybody can find Cornell Notes templates on the internet in a jiffy. There's lots of them. Cornell Notes are very handy, especially if you need to review for tests. And we're going to see if we can call one up for you right now. How many have used Cornell Notes? Anybody used it already? Good. We have at least one. And going to Google, we'll show you how we find a template. Several kinds here. We're going to take the time to do this because I'm sure that you'll find this useful. You can use it digitally, or you can print it out and use a pen to write in one of these templates. I think you could use anything like this, or backup. Yeah, all right. You divide the paper into 3 parts. On the left is the keyword, and on the right are the definitions. Don't you think that would be a useful kind of resource and strategy to use to help you remember and understand what you're reading? You can see how this works in this particular website. Okay, you'll find some other websites that you can actually print out and use if you're more comfortable writing your notes by hand. Okay. Actually, there's a website that I have here in my notes that you could use later. Okay. And I think if there are no questions about this, we can move on to the third R, review with the recall diagram. This diagram is an example using that article that I mentioned before. The topic, critical period hypothesis. Significant details were put on here by the student, and then the student related the content to their own experience. And then the reaction here is the most important part of critical thinking. This diagram is not really a diagram, but it uses these 4 prompts. Look for the topic, significant detail, look for relating, and reacting. You are looking through your own lens now. You're questioning and challenging the author now. Some things to look for include limitations of the information, biases that may come up in the reading, faulty reasoning, questions left unaddressed, and problems with or alternate interpretation of the author's examples. All of these are using critical thinking at the highest level. Okay, so now you can inform your own ideas and theories. What parts would you revise, and what is your perspective on the author? You're bringing, as I said, a personal perspective to the text. You're relating and recalling. So it's about to summarize here. When you use the survey question 3R strategies, remember these parts that SQ3R means: survey, question, preview, read, recall, and review. But also remember something else, that error marks the place where education begins. So if you find yourself making mistakes and having that feeling of aporia, it's helpful. It creates an aha moment where you can break through that aporia and end up with understanding. So it's a good thing to, as you go through, remembering to welcome errors, because they will show you that you're about to learn something and apply it and remember it. So now it's your turn to react to our strategies. We're interested in knowing which ones appealed to you the most. And here's some examples of the ones that we offered today. Mnemonics, think alouds, annotations, Cornell notes, outlines. Okay, Tara, would you Tara prefers Cornell notes, annotations, and Cornell notes. So no, you aren't restricted to just one. I'm just wondering why you would prefer Cornell notes, Tara. Do you have a mic where you could talk to us? I'm glad to see that Jana uses annotations and outlines together, and Kathy uses outlines and think-alouds. I didn't feature anything about outlines here because I figured everybody would know about that, but I wanted to include them because, of course, they're a perfectly legitimate and helpful strategy. So Tara, you think writing in Cornell notes would allow you to see it and retain it, and certainly be able to review it as well. Does anyone have any examples of mnemonics that they found helpful? I know you said you use some. Can you share some with us? I guess it would, if you don't have a mic, you need to kind of write some brief explanations about it. So to memorize, you use mnemonics, right? Okay. Does anyone think that they would find the recall diagram helpful? You can raise your hand. Okay, that's kind of a comprehensive general review, but Cynthia would. That's good. Not sure. I can understand that. Well, it's something that you can start off with. It doesn't take much time. It's not very complicated. But the recall diagram, as I would like to emphasize, is what helps you bring your own perspective in. And it's also where you develop your critical thinking skills. Because remember, you can question the author's ideas. You can go through and see if perhaps there would be other ways to look at the text. Does anyone have any problems in understanding, or any problems with particular subject areas that are more difficult than others? Yeah, I was just referring to this recall diagram. The relate and the react section, statistics. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm afraid I'm very rusty on statistics myself, but do you think any of these applications would apply, or can anyone else suggest any strategies that would apply? So it does require excellent note-taking. Okay. Text for religious classes. Okay, what application do you think would work for religion classes? Are there concepts and vocabulary that need to be highlighted there? How about annotations? I would think that would be a good way to use it, where you determine what the main idea is, even in each. Great, great. Well, I think you've got the key to that. How is it working pretty well for you, Donicia? Okay, the new concepts. So far, so good. Yes. Okay. So, you know, have you been using a pen and or pencil and writing in your texts? Does anybody have the nerve to do that? You can, yeah, good. Well, I think you ought to go ahead and continue with that. Oh, well, now wait a minute. The price of textbooks. Does anybody have any other, and does anybody agree with that or explain how that might not be a stumbling block? You rented your textbook, I see. So the suggestion here by the moderator is a good one. You could use Post-it notes with different colors. And then the keywords on the Post-it notes. Good idea. And then, of course, you have the page numbers to perhaps in the Cornell notes so that you could go back and review it. Okay, we have some hands raised. Index cards, good old index cards. They work too. How do you flag, Anna? The Post-it notes, or you write down the page number? Great. And they come in all sizes, those Post-its. Just agreeing. Okay, I understand, Pamela. You're able to highlight the text on the page. All right. You know, more and more we're having e-textbooks available to students, and those can be highlighted electronically, as we had in the example earlier. Okay, right, because the suggestion here was to search for keyword in e-texts. And that's a real advantage, isn't it, over regular textbooks, because you have to kind of turn a lot of pages before you find the particular keyword you were looking for. Textbooks, I think some of them are going to be available to you. More and more will be available as an e-book in the library. And of course, we're talking about reading strategies for different kinds of materials. Right. All right, here's the final question. What was it that you were looking for, and have you found anything like the answer you needed? We're curious. And Shante wanted to increase her productivity. And I think that it was certainly, if you apply the SQ3R, it increases productivity because it's the most efficient. And strangely enough, ironically enough, how many people were surprised to hear me say to wait and stop before you read, before you start from beginning to end? How many people found that a surprise? And do we have any happy faces on that? Well, yeah, thank you very much. And there are other people who feel happy about that. Yes, well, we're hoping that you will find college reading to be different, but you'll be able to apply some of these strategies to make it more efficient and easier for you, especially if you're starting. Okay, well, I think you need to, first of all, strategize your priorities. What assignments are due first, and just tackle them one at a time. Somebody said you can even eat an elephant if you take it one bite at a time. Of course, you know, everybody, and especially if you're new, the first thing we tell students in courses is to download and print out your schedule and take a look at it, if not every day, for each course, every other day. And of course, if you're taking 3 courses, you have to check those 3 schedules. How many of you always print out your assignment schedules and your yes, that's definitely the recommendation. I think that to be a good writer, it's much easier if you're a good reader. I don't know any good writers who don't read a lot. I don't know what you mean by good reader. You may be a fast reader or somebody who enjoys reading. But definitely reading is the key to writing. But writing is a different kind of skill too. What you have to do is develop your critical thinking thoughts, but to make sure you're focusing on topics. So if you're a good reader who can identify the main idea and then see how the details relate to that main idea, then you'll be able to summarize when you write. Somebody said something about they don't like what?
You don't like reading. You're a terrible writer.
Oh, if you don't like reading, I don't know. It's hard for me to generalize. I imagine you have to find something something positive that you can do in terms of reading in order to, you know, some kind of reading that you enjoy. What is expected will define what you need to write about. That's absolutely correct. Long readings, of course, should be broken down into short blocks. As I said, you can eat an elephant if you one bite at a time. And it's much easier to read if you have some of these strategies going. If you're able to highlight, if you're able to make post-it notes, if you're able to identify the key words and put the definitions in your Cornell notes, or a mind map. But a good reader identifies the topic and then finds keywords that relate to the topic. Deborah, I agree with you. You just need to know how to cut up the elephant. So remember, you don't start right away from the beginning. You survey, you look at the topics, you look at the highlights, you look at the visuals, the charts, the pictures, and then you relate it to your own experience and you react after you've read. But the questions that you have in your mind are essential to gleaning and comprehending the text, to finding out what you don't know, to assimilating and relating it to the schema of the experience you already have. Just remember, in statistics, in the religion course, what is it I already know, and what do I need to know? And finally, we're remembering to read the assignment very closely to come up with questions before reading. Formulating what strategy you're going to use, or your idea about how you're going to respond, and compare it with what the author is saying. Jana's suggestion to print your assignments out is very good. 3 more hands raised. Tax a dictionary to your homepage. Very good. Anyone else have any other features of Angel that or Word that they use? Of course, in Word, when you're writing, there's the thesaurus that you should not shy away from. It's very helpful, and it will increase your writing vocabulary as well as your reading comprehension.
What's the difference between a dictionary and a thesaurus?
Okay, a dictionary, the difference between the two is that a dictionary gives you definitions. A thesaurus will tell you other words that are synonyms.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, the synonyms may have just a little different meaning. I'm hearing an echo, so that's why my answers are strung out a bit. Okay, that's all right. Anyone else have any other questions? Now's the time. We can end a little early. And remember that if you have any questions that you think of later, that you're quite welcome to contact Terry And myself, if you need to, through esc.edu.
And remind them tonight, if they have not signed up, there is time management.
By the way, tonight at 6 o'clock, there's a time management webinar. If you haven't signed up, it's not too late, so that you can pick up some more strings to your bow as you go through your college work. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and we're glad you signed up for the 6 o'clock webinar.